So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at first Monday in October, the US Supreme Court.
Quite the name.
Yes. So this is, most likely when you're watching this is part of the crowdfunding campaign to support this, as this goes to production. This is from Fort Circle Games. Fort Circle Games, if you don't know, have done games like Shores of Tripoli, Votes for Women, and they got a few other very cool ones kind of on the docket. This is one of those games. We just played this today. We played it 3-player, and what you won't see in this video is how to play it, but we'll kind of show some shots of the board so that you can get a bit of gauge of what it looks like set up. And we just kind of played it. Kevin Bertram, who owns Fort Circle Games, flew into town, brought this with him, set it up, taught us how to play it, and played it with us. He's just in the other room. He's got guns to our back, so if we say nice things, that's why. But we just wanted to sit down and kind of chat about what this game is, where it sits in your collection, and what we thought of the actual game experience.
Yep.
So, what you might not have noticed is I didn't say it was a war game, because it's not a war game, right? It's about the Supreme Court. This is, by all intents and purposes, kind of a worker placement style-ish Euro-y game.
Yeah.
And by that, what you're doing is you as a player kind of represent a faction, kind of, and you are trying to influence and lobby Supreme Court justices to get them to adjudicate cases in your favor. There's kind of 4 different major kind of spectra or tracks that you're trying to affect, categories. And then, you know, the cases will fall into those, and how they lean on those tracks will affect how they decide these. And so you're trying to lobby for the ones that you want to do, and, you know, lobby for judges you want to get appointed to the bench when some of them retire.
Because they help you or hinder your opponents when they retire, and even when they get onto the bench.
Yeah, and
basically their philosophy about the law is abstracted into one of those 4 categories.
Yeah.
And then as they come onto the court, those categories are affected either positively or negatively.
And when we say positively or negatively,
it's up or down.
We mean that up or down on a track.
It's just a spectrum of kind of power and authority, and
I think technically it's like federalist and anti-federalist on these 4 different spectra. So it's not like
that.
Oh, he's a liberal, he's a conservative. It's not.
It's not like that.
It's not like that gameplay-wise, because you kind of don't care. It's about getting prestige.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to win a variety of different types of cases. There's a set collecting aspect that'll give you a ton of points at the end of the game. Or you're trying to specialize. If you win like all of the executive power cases, that can get you a lot of points as well. But
or
then,
if you match sets with one of each different type, that'll get you a bonus score.
Or just having lots of clerks who are working for the guys, lobbying kind of thing, that can get you points. So it's more about, they're called prestige points, because it's just about how much you influence the court to decide things. That just like having your name on all of the briefs and all of the decisions and things, that's what you score points. So it's not like it's not a politically motivated anything really.
No, I think it's as apolitical as it can be in a game form where we're talking about true historical landmark cases. You know, Dred Scott. All of these kind of large cases, some small, some large, but all historically based.
And they have, you know, flavor text on them, because, you know, it's this half of it has the name of this, you know, of the defendant, and this one has of the
plaintiff.
Plaintiff, that's the one. And, you know, some of the, I don't know, most of them.
I knew about half of them.
Yeah, I probably knew like 4. But they have like text to explain very broadly, like, hey, they were trying to do this. Or like, this is what this case was about. So it's a great, I think
historical
a lot of their tool is an educational piece. I think it's really good for that. That's going to go in a classroom well. And it's also one of those games where it can sit 4 players. You're going to play this in 90 minutes.
Once you get the rules down, I really think 90 minutes is about what it's going to take.
And you'll have, you know, and it's about commitment of resources and turn taking. So you get the great Euro mechanics, because very, very tight amount of actions that you can take. And
you only get 3 actions per turn.
And the turn order is key. I always liked that in something like Puerto Rico, where the turn order is so important, going around that rondel.
But in this one, rather than going first, going last is really
You want to go
important.
last.
And you can't control that because that does just kind of circulate. But man, when you are last, you have got to take advantage of that.
Yes.
And either get in a good position to specifically win or score as many points as possible, or stop your opponent because they're in the lead.
Yeah, you're trying to capitalize on that because you save your big action till last. You've seen the board state and you're like, whammy, I can do this. And everyone else can see you're going to do that, and so they have to play to that.
Defensively, and it's cool.
It works really well. And I'm not a person who typically loves Euro games, right?
Sure.
I think a lot of them, the themes just aren't particularly interesting, or sometimes they feel a bit too long. This sits at both of those things are really good for this.
I think a lot of Euro games, frankly, they're just a theme is pasted on. And in some ways, this is because everything has to be abstracted. But as we played through it, I could see the historical connections based on, when you're placing your clerks out to influence candidates to get onto the court. That's a part of the process, and you gain from that. So you can feel that. You can also see it executed on the board and in the way the cases move along and they get adjudicated. But I could make a connection between all those points and the real world. So I very much enjoyed that part of the process.
Well, and I liked what you were doing as a player, because you have these kind of 3 end game goal cards, and those do, like, it might seem like it's kind of arbitrary, like end-game tracks, but they have a name on them as well. Mm-hmm. And you kind of, the mechanic is you whittle it down. And so whichever one you end at, technically that's the one you were the whole time, if you think about it that way. And like, that was your faction. So like, one of them that I had was labor unions. Mm-hmm. And if you have that at the end, like, you played as the labor unions the whole time, so... And it's this legacy, because this covers like 200 plus years of the US Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So you're not like a guy, but it's like the labor union's interests over the course of a couple centuries and many decades, right?
Yep.
I think that's a really neat thing that, again, in a lot of Euro games, it's like, put my ingredients into a factory to make some stuff to sell it in the market, or grow some plants to transport them and make food, and like, it's okay.
That's not what we were doing here.
But I think, it felt like...
It felt...
The theme was a bit more interesting to me, at least.
Yeah.
And... it played in like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So it didn't overstay its welcome. Mm-hmm. And when we were getting towards the end game, everyone was kind of like, okay, no more futzing around.
Yeah.
Like, everyone became almost like very hawkish in the game, which was really good.
Well, hawkish is a good word, because I think near the end of the game, as things start coming down, you're in some ways counting everybody's points.
Yes.
Trying to understand how far behind are you, what are they going to gain, how are you going to change that? But you begin thinking about how to affect everything. And it's like one of these, it's a game where there's so many different moving parts that it all moves together and works together. And you've got to understand the machinery and how that works, or you're not going to perform that well.
And whilst we have played a lot of games and can do that pretty well, I don't think it's so complex where you couldn't get it after a play.
Well, I really feel like after about 3/4 of the way through the game, it all clicked for me. And then I was very effective in those last couple of turns. Doesn't mean that it's overly complex. I think it's a positive, because it shows that the game does have a lot of thought, consideration, and then options. How are you going to play? How many times did we sit there and talk about, okay, we're working together because he had the lead.
Right now we are.
How are we going to change what's going on? And then you kind of figure that out together. And there were a couple times, like I said, I can't do that. I can do this, but if you want this to happen, you're going to have to do that. And I think one time you decided, after I did my thing, it wasn't what you wanted to do. And that's okay. I remembered that.
Yeah, there's always that stuff. And again, I think a lot of Euro games don't have that.
Sure.
And I think because it's, I'm either tableau building or do it, every man for himself. In this one, especially at 3 players.
Yes.
There's that element of, we can work together to halt him because he's in the lead. Great, we're kind of on even level, every man for himself again, and then that might change again.
Yeah.
And Kevin had mentioned at 4 players, you often get like a bit more teamwork on two sides, because we were like, if two of us were, lobbying for a particular case, the third person often didn't get involved.
Because it's almost useless at that point.
Yes.
It's going to require a lot of resources to catch up, and then you may not score it at the end.
Whereas I can imagine a 4-player game, I might have a guy on the top and they've got 2 on the bottom, each one of those guys. Well, a fourth person can come in and either gazump the winning side, or they could join the losing side, and then these two can team up and swing it and maybe win stuff there.
Yeah.
So that I can imagine how 4 players, it would also be really fun as well.
Well, I think Kevin mentioned the sweet spot is 3 players.
Yeah.
But it is designed... I'm not sure it has a solo mode, but it probably does. We didn't play the solo mode.
Yeah, I just don't know that.
But I think that any game that you can play 3 and 4 player, to me, is a good thing. You get more people to the table, there's a little more interaction, and there is some negotiation. That's not necessarily a part of the game, right? It's not a requirement of the game for that to happen.
No, but I hope they put in the rules that it's encouraged.
Yes, because
this is
a
table talk game.
But I think it all works together very well to create, I think, a very interesting Eurocentric style of game experience. It reminded us a little bit, totally different situation of Versailles, 1919 from GMT Games.
There's a lot of commonality in the style of game. How it's implemented is quite different, but it's the idea of you've got all of those issues and they kind of march down the line and you can see what's coming next, and trying to influence those before they come to the table, and they're adjudicated per who's got the most stuff on them. But here you have the how will it be adjudicated tracks as well, which is really fun that you get to influence. It's not just the person in charge decides.
Well, and I think the final thing I want to say about the complexity concept of the game, there's a lot that you have to pay attention to. You have to be considering how every element will affect every other element.
Yeah.
From the justices retiring because there's an ability on that, to the cases that are decided because there's an ability on that, to even when the Supreme Court candidates are being considered, when they come onto the court, there's a benefit to that. And it's important for us to, as we played, to keep that all in mind, and it really kept me engaged.
But that wasn't overwhelming.
No, it wasn't overwhelming.
Because I think in a lot of big Euro games, which I think they get ahead of themselves, there's too much to consider. And it's like, if there's 17 things, I'm out. I lose interest.
Here there's like 5 things.
5 or 6. It's manageable, and it's a good workout without being like, ugh, I need an Excel sheet.
To me, it kept me engaged and kept me watching what was happening.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times Euros really suffer from the concept of, I'm just doing my thing. Yes. My turn's over.
There's none of that here.
We go to you do your turn. I don't really care what you do. This game, you've got to pay attention, focus, and understand what they're doing and how that changes your plans. And I like that because it keeps you engaged, keeps it moving, and keeps it interesting.
Yeah, and whilst it's very different from something like Hegemony, it reminds me of that, where every action you take in this game has a pretty meaningful consequence. And that consequence might simply be, hey, I moved up on a track, but that means I'm going to score everything. What it does is it means that everyone else starts looking at me sideways.
Yeah.
And they're going to start reacting to that. Or I might, if I bring someone onto the bench by kind of supporting that candidate, I'm doing it for one of these icons. They have a second icon.
Yes.
That icon's going to help someone else most likely.
Yep.
So do I really want to do that?
Or hurt someone else.
Right.
It just depends on what's going on.
So there's most things in this game have not just a benefit to you, but some other consequence, either a benefit or a detriment to someone else, and that will also have knock-on consequences. And again, I really like that. It's not just, I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
There's none of that in this. And I also appreciated that that I didn't feel like I wasted a single action in this game. There was never a point where I was like, I'll just do this.
Yeah, I think we carefully considered what we were doing with each action. I would say I would agree with you in that, but there were a couple of times I tried to take the best action, not necessarily the action that I wanted to take. Does that make sense? There are some times where I had to take a certain action because it would get me in a position to benefit from something else.
Right, but it was never like, I'm just
wasting.
I'll throw a guy in the station for a point. Like, I was never doing that. And, again, some Euro games, either at the end or in the middle, it's kind of like,
Agreed.
I almost
With this last worker, there's nothing I can really do.
There's no last extra worker. It's a very tight game.
Yep, 3 actions.
And that's something that I appreciate about the design. I think Tali did a really good job mechanically of making it work. And it doesn't take that long either, which is, again, really good.
Well, I think to the maturity of the design, when we were playing, it felt like this had been put through the paces, had been given a lot of effort, things had been tweaked to really create a pretty slick, tight experience. The other thing I will comment about the production on this, and this is just a prototype copy, not a final copy by any means, but the boards are recessed, right? You've got these tracks with big chunky wooden blocks that move down. Those are pretty slick.
And apparently there's a first player gavel, which we did not have.
Well, we had to improvise. We had a different kind of gavel, and a warthog shell, but we're war gamers. But it's very well produced. It's beautiful. It looks good. You're going to get your value here, and you're going to need to get this on Kickstarter now, because I think this one's going to sell out once it hits the market. And once people realize what it is, I think it's gonna really do well among those who like historically focused games.
Yeah, so a lot of people who watch our channel are pretty intense war gamers.
Yep.
If you don't like Euro games, this is a Euro game, right?
Yeah, don't be fooled. It's not a war game.
But I do think the topic's interesting, and if you're gonna play a Euro game, this is one that I would play again.
Yes.
And it's the time to play, the topic. It is a piece of history. The next time I play it, I'm going to see different cases, different things that happen, and I'm going to continue to learn whilst I play this as well.
Yes.
And I think it's just a really interesting space to play with. Because I think when it was first broached, like, oh, this is a game about the Supreme Court, and I was like, what is that going to be like? What is that like? And this was I was really happy with the implementation, and it worked really well.
Well, I think I was pleasantly surprised. After playing it, I was like, "Oh, that was really
like
good."
This is a really tight Euro game.
Yeah,
it really is.
And it was very enjoyable to play, very interesting because it has all that interaction, and really a well done game. Very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think massive credit to Fort Circle Games, because they are establishing themselves as a company that makes, like you said, I think very well play tested, very tight games.
Well, and beautifully produced.
Yeah, I think they are. When they choose to make a game and put it out there, it's often real slick.
Yep.
And they put a lot of effort into that, and they work with people who have put in that effort and that time, both for developmental and research purposes. And you can see it in this. You really can. So, first Monday in October from Fort Circle Games. Check this out if this is something you're interested in, but appreciate you tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.